So for number 3, we have a question about Halloween. And we're asked to fill our Halloween bags with the most valuable candy, so long as we don't go over capacity. So in this case, value of a candy means the length of its name. And if we have a candy like Twix, since this is 4 characters, it has value of 4. And for candy such as M&M's, this is 5 characters, so it has a value of 5. So given some kinds of candies, we're going to try to pick the combination of candies that gives us the most value for our bag without going over capacity. And you can think of this as like if you have a bag, you don't want to fill it with so much candy that it actually breaks. So we want to find that Goldilocks condition where we have a lot of value in our bag, but it doesn't go over and overflows. Okay, and one crucial hint for this problem is that we're going to maximize our haul by always taking the most valuable candy first. So you can think of how the max function will play into this, as well as something like the remove function. And as you'll see later, I'm actually going to use the function called pop, and you can think of this pop function as being very similar to the remove function. So you can use either one of them in your solution, but I'm just going to be using pop. And notice here that I've commented out or stroked out the 5 lines that are given to you, and that's because I'm actually going to be introducing the alternative solution on the solution document, not the main solution. And I just find like the alternative solution is a little bit easier to read and maybe easier to follow as well, so I'll just be sticking with that one. Alright, so without further ado, we can start the code. So first things first, we know at the end we're going to return all the candies that are in our bag without going over the capacity value, right? So we can already define some result bag, and we're just initializing this to be some empty list. And we also want to keep track of our current value, so that we can compare to the capacity. I'm just going to call this value total. It's going to start at 0 first because we don't have any candies yet, but that will change later. And next, you can probably imagine that later down the line we're going to iterate over the candies. But before we want to do that, we're actually going to make a copy of the candies list. And the reason why we want to do this is that if you iterate over lists that also change during the loop, it's actually going to cause some really weird behavior. And so a general rule is that you should always make a copy of the list that you're going to iterate over if you also change it or modify it during the list as well. Okay, so now we're going to start some kind of while loop. And because I never want to go over my capacity, that's going to be one of my conditions. While capacity is greater than total, that means I haven't gone over my capacity value. And len of copy candies is greater than 0. And this will make more sense later when we start actually removing candies. So next we're going to determine the lengths of each candies, because remember up here we're passed in Snickers, Twix, Kit Kat, dots, and so forth. So we don't actually have the lengths itself or the values itself, but rather the names. So for each candy I'm just going to figure out what that value is using a list comprehension. Alright, next we're going to find the value of the candy with the most value. So we'll call that the current best. And that will be the max of the length. So this is the candy with the longest name, and this is its value. And we're calling it current best because at some point, we might have already taken the value with the candy with the most value, and next we have to look at the remaining candies. So then there'll be a second best, a third best, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now we're going to take that candy with the greatest value by using some list functions. And I'll explain soon what this really means. Okay, so first of all, we have length.index of current best. So what that really means is it's going to find the index where current best occurs, and basically it's going to give that index to the pop function and take the element at copy candies at that index. So basically it's just going to find the candy with the most value. So it first finds the length of the candy with the longest name, and then it finds the candy that is referred to with that length. So basically length or value, and this is the candy itself. So these two are paired. Okay. Now we're going to see if we add this candy to our total, will it go over our capacity? And we're going to do this with the if statement. So if total plus current best is less than or equal to cap, then we want to add it. Because the opposite of this is if adding the current best brings us over the cap, makes it greater than the cap, then we don't want to do anything, right? Because then we'll have overflowed, the bag break, we have no more candy, everybody's sad, and so we don't want to mess with that candy. We're just going to continue our loop. But if not, we're going to add current best to our total, and then also add the candy that we were looking at, which is the candy that this length corresponds to. Right, and remember that whenever you add to a list, you have to enwrap the item that you want to add in brackets, because the plus equals will be expecting a list itself, so you have to wrap the item in brackets to add the two lists together. Okay, and that's it for this code, because after this while loop runs, we'll have added all the most valuable candy to our list, and then at the very end we're going to return result back. Right, so that's it for this question, but I do want to note, just as a parting thought, that if you felt this question was particularly difficult, please don't get too hung up on it, because this question, out of all the questions on the exam, was particularly challenging for students who took this exam. So if you find yourself stuck on it, don't worry, you should come to office hours and ask about it. But generally it's a pretty challenging question, and sometimes if you even look at the solution, it can be pretty hard to understand, especially with these new functions that you might not be familiar with. But just know that it boils down to going through the loop of the candies, and then finding their lengths, finding the best candy, and then using an if statement to see if we've gone over the capacity or not. And if we have not, then we want to add that candy, and so on and so forth. So this is really just testing your knowledge of iteration, control, your familiarity with lists, and syntax and stuff like that.